Japan is famous for its clean streets, delicious food, and long life expectancy, and all these positive qualities are the result of deep cultural roots, some of which are difficult for foreigners to comprehend, and yet they make perfect sense if you think about them. And while I'm not Japanese myself, my wife is, so we practice many of these habits in our home. Let's talk about 12 habits and practices that help Japanese people live healthier, long lives. And the last one is always the most difficult for my Canadian friends and family to understand. Let's get started. Number 1, Japanese people always take their shoes off when entering a home. This is made easier by the existence of a genkan, which is a small area inside the front door with a step up into the rest of the house. This area is usually filled with shoes, so it's obvious that you're supposed to take them off, and the step serves as an additional reminder. Usually houses and establishments will also have slippers that you can put on once you step up and inside. The reason this is healthy is that when you take your shoes off, you don't drag the dirt and germs from the street into your house. Because of this, it makes the inside of the house a cleaner space. Number 2, it is typical for Japanese people to shower and bathe at night before going to bed. During my first visit to Japan, on the first night at my wife's parents' house, my mother-in-law offered for me to be the first person to take a bath. I declined and said I'd have one in the morning. Then everyone else had a bath, and in the morning when I had a shower, she had to wash the shower room a second time. And that was the last time I ever had a shower in the morning. It totally makes sense. After you've been outside all day in the world, you change your clothes before bed, so why wouldn't you also take a shower too? In the summer, it's more obvious because you get sweaty, but it totally makes sense to wash yourself before going to bed if you've been out in the world getting dirty all day. And this is especially true if you live in a city. Number 3, people wear masks in public when they are sick. Before COVID, people rarely ever wore masks where I live, but during my first visit to Japan, which was many years before COVID even happened, and it happened to be also during the winter time, I was surprised to see so many people wearing masks. One day, when my mother-in-law was wearing one, I asked why, and she said because she had a scratchy throat. Later, I noticed too that when people wore masks, other people tended to not sit around them on the train. And later, I was told that when you aren't feeling great and you wear a mask, it's a sign for other people that they should keep a distance from you, and thus can help avoid getting sick. Number 4, Japanese school children are taught to gargle water at lunchtime and when getting home from school. The idea being that they will wash away the germs that might be stuck in their throats. This is something that my wife told me about in the past, but this year I've been very diligent about doing it. And while there may be various factors, I feel like I've been less sick this year than last year. The idea of gargling water has been tested by scientists in Japan. A study in 2002 from Kyoto University found that people who gargled regularly with water were 35% less likely to get sick than those who didn't. But even if you don't believe this study, it makes sense that washing your throat would help, even if it's just to remove some dust. Number 5, Japanese people tend to brush their teeth at lunch, even at work. I remember seeing someone brushing their teeth in the bathroom at my old job, and I thought it was kind of strange. But then my wife told me at her old jobs in Japan, everybody brushed their teeth after lunch. Also, my daughter had to bring a toothbrush to her Japanese school last summer. I know that most people around here don't brush their teeth at lunch, but it makes sense to do it. And it gives the germs in your mouth less time to form cavities because you're washing them away more often. Number 6, in Japan, when you go to a restaurant, you will usually be given an oshibori, which is a towel you can use to wash your hands before you eat a meal. This makes the whole process of washing your hands so much easier, and because it's given to you, you don't even need to think about doing it. I'm a bit strange in that every time I'm at a restaurant after I order my food, I go to the washroom to wash my hands, but rarely do the people I am with do the same. When you are eating, there is a decent chance you need to touch the food, and if you haven't washed your hands, you'll transfer the germs to the food and then into your body. Washing your hands before you eat makes sense, but because it takes effort, people don't usually do it. But with an oshibori, you don't need to think about it because someone hands you a solution. Number 7, a typical Japanese meal consists of lots of different foods and ingredients. Growing up in Canada, I was used to having meat, rice or potatoes, and then a single vegetable, so maybe 3 or 4 main ingredients. But a typical Japanese meal has upwards of 10 or more different ingredients, though they are in smaller proportions. If you ever go to a traditional Japanese restaurant or stay at a ryokan, there's a good chance you'll have a kaiseki meal, which is a traditional multi-course dinner consisting of up to 10 or more small dishes, which means you're having lots of different types of foods. My wife is usually the one who does the cooking at our house, and she always makes such elaborate meals, and she tells me we're supposed to eat at least 30 different foods each day to get all our vitamins and minerals. This totally makes sense. The more variety of foods you eat, the better it will be, assuming they are healthy and consist mostly of fruits, vegetables, nuts, meats, and grains. Number 8. It is common for Japanese people to have house clothes, which is a change of clothes for when they come home from school or work. In Japan, lots of people have uniforms or they need to wear a suit, so it makes sense that when they get home, they would change into something more comfortable. Another part of this could be when you have a bath or a shower at night, you may have it after dinner, so you aren't necessarily ready for bed, but you need to wear something different than what you were wearing during the day. Like having a shower at night, after a day out in the world, you are inevitably going to be covered with dirt and germs, so it makes sense to change clothes into something that is cleaner. When I used to ride the subway every day, I always wanted to change my clothes when I got home. Public transit isn't always the cleanest place, and after sitting on the train, I didn't want to sit on my couch. Number 9. In Japan, if you live in an urban area, it will likely have good public transit, which means that people don't drive as much and instead can walk, because they need to get to and from places after using transit. My wife says that it's also common to get off one stop early so that you can walk home and get a little more exercise every night. With everything being more accessible in the city, it is more common to walk. Even at nighttime in Japan, you will see tons of people walking around on the streets. Getting more exercise is a great way to stay healthy, and if you must walk to do your day-to-day activities, you are more likely to get the exercise you need. Where I live, we must drive everywhere to do anything, but when I lived in the city, it was much easier to walk and do most things. According to World Bank, 92% of Japanese people live in an urban area, which means that they likely will be getting enough exercise because they can walk to where they need to go. Number 10. Japanese people practice hara hachi bunmei, which means only eating till you are 80% full, meaning people are less likely to overeat, which in turn means they are less likely to be overweight. According to Wikipedia, the typical American consumes 28% more calories per day than the typical Japanese person, which could explain the big difference in the size of the people in these two countries. While controlling how much you eat isn't the only factor that contributes to your health and well-being, it is important to watch how much you eat, and Japanese people do this by default due to the hara hachi bunmei principle. Number 11. Japanese people drink lots of tea, and while the scientific evidence isn't very well established, most people would probably say that tea is a common beverage in Japan and a healthy alternative when compared to the other types of beverages that people typically consume. Finally, number 12. And this is the one that my friends and family think is weird and have no interest in trying, even though I have one in my home. But if you've ever been to Japan, you might have noticed that most washrooms have a fancy toilet seat called a washlet, which is a more modern type of bidet with some extra features. To be totally honest, the first time I saw one, I was afraid to try it out. It seemed weird or something, but eventually I gave in and tried one out, and I have since been a fan. In fact, the Total washlet was the first souvenir I bought for myself during my first visit to Japan 7 or so years ago. And while I was only able to use it in Canada for the first time 2 years ago, it now feels dirty when I have to use a toilet somewhere other than my own house. A washlet bidet is so much cleaner than toilet paper, and afterwards you only need to dry yourself, so you end up cleaner everywhere. I honestly love my washlet, and I can't imagine going back to using only toilet paper. I also think it's kind of self-explanatory as to why this would be good for your health. Hopefully this list of habits and practices gives you some perspective on how you could live a healthier life. Let me know what you think of these ideas in the comments below. Click that like button and subscribe for more content like this.